I never thought I'd be here, alone, in a nursing home, with nothing but memories of a life I once had. My days were filled with the hum of old radios and the shuffle of slippers on linoleum floors. But then, the letter came. It was from the lawyer of my estranged brother, Lawrence. The words inside felt like a dream. We regret to inform you of your brother's passing. He has left you a ranch in his will. At first, I thought it was a mistake. Lawrence and I hadn't spoken in years, decades, really. The bitterness between us was enough to fill an ocean, but here I was, the unexpected recipient of something that was once his. I couldn't wrap my mind around it. Why would he leave me a ranch? He'd always made it clear that I was a distant memory, an afterthought in his world of wealth and success. But there it was, a piece of paper that would forever change my life. The next day, I packed what little I had left and set off for the ranch. As the car drove farther into the countryside, I couldn't help but wonder what awaited me. The ranch stood tall against the skyline, a sprawling land with acres of fields that seemed endless. The house was old, weathered by time, but still standing strong. It felt like a ghost of the past, a place where memories were buried beneath layers of dust and neglect. I stood there, looking at it, unsure of what to do next. I had no family left, no children, no friends close enough to call. Lawrence had been my only tie to the world outside this nursing home, and now even he was gone. I took a deep breath, walked up the creaky stairs, and pushed open the door. Inside, the air was thick with silence. The wooden floors groaned beneath my weight as I explored the rooms. They were empty, except for the remnants of a life lived here. Old books, faded photographs, and furniture that had seen better days. There was a sense of loneliness that filled the house, but it was strangely comforting. This place, this ranch, it was mine now. As I moved deeper into the house, I came across an old barn at the back of the property. It was falling apart, but something about it called to me. I hesitated for a moment before making my way toward it, curiosity bubbling inside me. The barn door creaked as I opened it, revealing the shadows inside. The smell of hay and wood filled the air. As I stepped further inside, I noticed something unusual, a stack of old boxes in the corner. I knelt down, dusting them off, and found an old trunk, locked tight with a rusty padlock. My heart raced as I tried to open it. What was inside? Was it just old family belongings, or was there something more? I found a key on a nearby shelf, almost as if it was placed there for me to find. With trembling hands, I unlocked the trunk. Inside, I discovered bundles of old documents, strange symbols, and maps that looked like they had been drawn decades ago. As I flipped through the papers, one of them caught my eye. It was a will, an updated one from Lawrence. I couldn't believe it. He had left me more than just the ranch. Hidden in these documents was something far more valuable than I had ever imagined. A fortune, a secret treasure buried somewhere on this property. But why had he hidden it? What was he trying to tell me? The realization hit me hard. My brother, despite everything, had left me a legacy, a mystery, and perhaps even a chance for redemption. But now, I wasn't sure who I could trust. The family I had once known seemed like strangers. Had they known about this hidden fortune? Were they planning to come here, to claim what was rightfully mine? My hands shook as I closed the trunk, my mind racing with possibilities. I knew one thing for sure, this ranch held more than just land. It held secrets, and I was going to uncover every single one of them. I spent the next few days trying to process everything. The ranch was quiet, almost too quiet. The eerie silence had settled into my bones, making it hard to shake the feeling that I was being watched. I had always been independent, but now, I was alone in this massive house, miles away from anything familiar. Each room I walked through felt like a ghost from the past, familiar yet foreign, as though Lawrence's presence still lingered in the air. I spent hours going through his things, but nothing seemed to explain why he left me this ranch, or why he had kept this hidden fortune. It was only when I stumbled across another old journal, tucked away in a drawer, that things began to make sense. The handwriting was unmistakable, Lawrence's, though it was filled with strange symbols and notes that made little sense at first. It was as if he had been preparing for something he hadn't told anyone. As I turned the pages, I found references to the land itself, hidden markers, landmarks, and old stories about treasures buried beneath the soil. My pulse quickened. Had Lawrence known something I didn't? Was this ranch not just a piece of property but a clue to something much greater? With no one else around to guide me, I took it upon myself to follow the clues. The first marker led me to the edge of the ranch, where a large oak tree stood proudly in the field. Its trunk was thick and sturdy, but there was something strange about it. As I walked around it, my fingers brushed against something cold. I knelt down and felt around the base of the tree, my hands trembling. There, buried beneath the roots, I found a small metal box. I pulled it out, wiping away the dirt and grime. Inside was a map, old and worn, with markings that seemed to align perfectly with the descriptions in Lawrence's journal. The map was covered in symbols, many of which I didn't recognize, but one thing was clear: it was a guide to something hidden deep within the ranch. But the more I studied the map, the more I realized I wasn't the only one who had been looking for it. There were signs of recent activity, footprints, broken branches, and disturbed earth. Someone else had been here, someone who knew about the fortune. I felt a knot tighten in my stomach. Who else was after this treasure? Was it just the local townsfolk, curious about the ranch's history, or were there people who knew more about my brother's intentions than they were letting on? My suspicion grew when I saw a truck parked by the barn one morning. It was an old model, but the paint was fresh, and the tires were still new. I hadn't heard any visitors arrive, yet there it was. My first instinct was to confront whoever it was, but something told me to hold back. I didn't know who to trust, and I wasn't about to reveal what I had just discovered. I kept my distance, watching from a window as two men emerged from the truck. They were strangers, men I had never seen before. They walked toward the barn with purposeful strides, their faces serious. I tried to make out their conversation, but the wind carried their voices away before I could catch anything. As they disappeared into the barn, I realized I couldn't wait any longer. I had to act. I couldn't let anyone else claim what was rightfully mine. The following morning, I returned to the tree with the map in hand. This time, I had a plan. The map seemed to lead me in circles around the property, each marker pointing to another clue, another spot on the ranch. It was as if Lawrence had designed this treasure hunt for me, knowing I would eventually find it. But why? What had he been trying to tell me? I had no answers, only more questions. And the deeper I went into this search, the more I realized I was becoming part of something far bigger than I had imagined. As the days passed, I began to feel the weight of my brother's secrets pressing down on me. The ranch wasn't just a gift, it was a puzzle, one that I had to solve to understand the truth about Lawrence and the fortune he had left behind. I could feel myself getting closer to something important. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. Every creak of the floorboards, every gust of wind outside felt like a warning. Someone else was out there, someone who would stop at nothing to get what was hidden on this land. My only choice was to stay ahead of them, to outsmart whoever was trying to beat me to the treasure. And as I ventured deeper into the ranch, the more I felt the presence of my brother, guiding me, protecting me, even from beyond the grave. I spent the next few days running through the clues, the map, and the journal in my head. Every moment felt like a step closer to uncovering what my brother, Lawrence, had left for me. But with every step forward, the nagging feeling of being watched grew stronger. I could hear the sound of footsteps outside my window, the rustling of the wind through the trees, but every time I looked, no one was there. It was as if the ranch itself was alive, waiting to reveal its secrets to me, but also warning me to be careful. Each clue seemed to pull me deeper into the mystery. The symbols on the map began to make sense, but they were cryptic, leading me on a trail I couldn't always understand. One afternoon, as I sat by the old fireplace, going over everything again, I heard a knock at the door. It was a sound I hadn't heard in days, and for a moment, I froze. The hair on the back of my neck stood up as I slowly made my way to the door. When I opened it, I was greeted by a man I hadn't seen before. He was in his mid-50s, with salt and pepper hair and a kind face, but there was something about him that seemed off. "Are you Eleanor Lawson?" he asked. "Yes, that's me," I replied cautiously. "I'm Edward, a friend of your brother's," he said, his voice calm but firm. "I heard about your recent arrival. I've been looking for you." My heart skipped a beat. A friend of Lawrence's? Why hadn't I heard of him before? Why was he showing up now? "What can I help you with?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "I know what you're looking for," Edward said, his eyes narrowing slightly. "I know about the treasure your brother left behind." I could feel my pulse quicken as I stepped back, letting him inside. Was this man here to claim the fortune, or was he another ally of Lawrence's, someone I could trust? "What do you know about it?" I asked, my voice low, barely above a whisper. Edward looked around the room, making sure no one was listening. "Your brother knew things that others didn't. Things that were hidden right under everyone's nose," he said, his voice tinged with mystery. "He left you the ranch, but there's more to it than that. Much more." My mind was racing. Lawrence had always been a private man, and now, it seemed, his secrets were spilling out, just when I was getting close to finding them. "How do you know all this?" I demanded, trying to make sense of it all. Edward took a deep breath and sat down. "Lawrence and I were business partners. We built something together, something your brother never told you about. A company, a venture. And now it's yours, but you need to understand what you're dealing with." "What company?" I asked, feeling completely lost. "That's not important right now," Edward said quickly. "What matters is the ranch, the fortune. Your brother hid it, and now it's your responsibility to find it. But you're not the only one looking." His words sent a chill down my spine. "Someone else was after the treasure?" "Who?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can't tell you everything," Edward replied, his voice dropping. "But I'll give you one piece of advice: trust no one. Not even me." His warning hung in the air, and I could feel the weight of it. The walls of the ranch seemed to close in around me, and the realization hit me like a ton of bricks. This was no longer just about uncovering my brother's past. It was about survival. I had no idea who I could trust, or who might be trying to stop me from finding the treasure. "What do I do now?" I asked, my voice trembling with uncertainty. Edward stood up, his eyes intense. "Keep searching. Keep following the clues. And don't let anyone distract you. The fortune is within your reach, but only if you're willing to fight for it." With that, he turned and walked out, leaving me standing there, more confused than ever. As I watched him disappear down the driveway, I couldn't shake the feeling that I had just made a dangerous ally, or perhaps, a dangerous enemy. The days that followed were a blur of activity. I spent every waking moment combing through the ranch, looking for any clue that would lead me to the hidden fortune. The map, the journal, and Edward's cryptic warning were all I had to go on. And with each passing day, I felt the pressure mounting. Whoever else was looking for this treasure was getting closer, and I had to stay ahead of them. It wasn't just a race for money, it was a race for my future. As the sun began to set one evening, I stood on the balcony overlooking the sprawling land. The ranch seemed endless, a vast sea of fields and barns that stretched out in every direction. Somewhere out there, buried deep beneath the soil, was a fortune that could change everything. But there were others out there too, hunting for the same thing. And if I didn't find it first, I knew the consequences could be dire. I took a deep breath and stared at the map once more. The next clue was close, I could feel it. And I wasn't about to let anyone, or anything, stand in my way. I had spent the last few days analyzing every detail Edward had given me, but nothing seemed to add up. The clues were leading me in circles, and I was starting to feel like I was losing my grip on everything. The ranch was vast, too vast for me to search alone, especially when I didn't know what I was even looking for. But I had no choice. The treasure Lawrence had hidden was out there, and I was determined to find it. That evening, I sat in the dim light of the living room, the map spread out before me. I stared at it for hours, tracing the lines, the markings. But the more I looked at it, the more I felt like I was missing something. Suddenly, I realized something. The symbols weren't just random, they were patterns, coordinates. Lawrence had left me a roadmap, but it was up to me to decode it. I stood up quickly, my heart pounding with excitement. I grabbed the old journal, flipping through it until I found what I needed. There, hidden between the pages, was a reference to the symbols. I scanned the words, reading them over and over. The fortune is not beneath, but within. What did that mean? It wasn't the first time I had seen these cryptic words, but this time, they felt different. Not beneath, but within, my mind raced. The treasure wasn't buried in the ground. It was inside something. Something on the ranch. I rushed outside, the cold night air hitting my face as I headed toward the barn again. The barn had always felt like a place of secrets, a place where something was hidden. I had already searched it, or so I thought. But now, it seemed like the answer was right in front of me. I approached the barn cautiously, feeling the weight of the night press down on me. The barn door creaked as I opened it, and I stepped inside, the faint smell of hay and wood filling my senses. The darkness seemed thicker here, as if the place had absorbed all the years of secrets it had kept. I moved toward the back of the barn, where an old wooden chest stood in the corner. The chest had always seemed out of place, old and worn down, but something about it felt different tonight. My fingers trembled as I reached for it, my heart racing. I had to know what was inside. I unlocked it with the key I had found earlier, and as I lifted the lid, a thick cloud of dust rose into the air. Inside, there was no treasure, no gold, no jewels. Instead, there were stacks of old documents, letters, and photographs. At first, I felt disappointment wash over me. But then, my eyes caught something, a small, ornate box buried under the papers. I pulled it out, my fingers shaking. The box was beautiful, its surface carved with intricate designs. It didn't look like much, but I knew it was important. I held my breath as I opened it, and inside, I found a single piece of paper. The paper was old, the ink faded, but it was clear enough to read. It was a letter. A letter from Lawrence, written just before his death. Eleanor, the letter began, I know you'll find this, even if I'm not there to see it. The fortune I leave behind is not measured in money or land. It's something that can't be touched, only understood. The true treasure is the knowledge you will gain from this ranch, the history it holds, and the legacy that you will continue. Do not be fooled by what others seek. What they want is not what you need. The letter was signed with a simple Lawrence. I stared at it for a long time, trying to make sense of his words. The fortune wasn't gold or jewels, but something deeper. But what was it? I felt the weight of his message settle in. Lawrence had known something I didn't, something about the ranch and the history it held. And it seemed that the true treasure was not something I could physically possess, but something that would reveal itself over time. As I sat there in the quiet of the barn, the pieces started to fall into place. My brother had never cared for wealth in the way others did. He had always valued knowledge, history, and legacy. The ranch wasn't just a place, it was a story, a history that needed to be uncovered. And I was the one who had to do it. But I wasn't the only one seeking the truth. Edward's warning echoed in my mind. Someone else was out there, someone who wanted what was hidden here. But what if the true treasure wasn't meant to be kept? What if it was meant to be shared, to be passed on? As I closed the box and stood up, I felt a new sense of purpose. The journey wasn't over. It had just begun. And I knew, deep down, that the real treasure was waiting for me, if I could unlock the secrets of the past. I had spent the entire morning trying to make sense of Lawrence's letter. It wasn't just a note, it was a message, a map that led to something more than gold, more than wealth. The fortune, my brother had said, was in the knowledge, in the legacy of the ranch. But what did that mean? I looked around the barn once again, feeling the weight of the question pressing on me. Was there something hidden here, something tied to the history of this land? I walked out to the yard, the sun beginning to dip low on the horizon, casting long shadows over the fields. The ranch, with its sprawling acres, had always seemed like an untouched relic of the past, but now it felt like a place full of secrets waiting to be discovered. I decided to go back to the map. The symbols were starting to make more sense, but I had to follow the path laid out by my brother, even if it seemed like nothing more than riddles. The first symbol, a circle with a line through it, pointed me to the well near the edge of the property. It was old, covered in moss, and looked like it hadn't been used in decades. But I had to check. As I approached, I noticed a strange marking on the stone surrounding the well, almost like a crack running along the surface. I traced my fingers over it, and to my surprise, it shifted. The stone moved, revealing a hidden compartment underneath. My heart raced as I knelt down, pulling out a weathered box. This wasn't what I had expected, but something told me it was important. Inside the box was a set of keys, 5 in total, each engraved with a different symbol. The first key had the same circle and line I had seen earlier on the map. I knew what I had to do next. I felt like a piece of the puzzle had clicked into place. These keys had to open something. I returned to the house and examined the rooms, looking for anything that might match the symbols on the keys. The study was the first place I thought of, the room where Lawrence had spent most of his time. I hadn't gone in since I arrived, but now it felt like the right place to start. The door creaked as I entered, the smell of old books filling the air. The room was dark, with only the faintest light coming through the windows. I began to search the shelves, running my fingers along the spines of books, hoping to find something, anything that might lead me to the next clue. Then I saw it. A small wooden box sitting on the desk, almost hidden behind a stack of papers. I knew without a doubt that this was what I had been searching for. I picked up the box and noticed a faint symbol carved into the lid. It was the same as one of the keys. I slipped the key into the lock and turned it. The box opened with a soft click. Inside, there was another letter, this one even older than the last, and a series of photographs. The letter was from Lawrence again, but this time, it was different. Eleanor, it began, I've left you the keys to this ranch, but not for you to simply claim what's yours. There is more to this place than what you see. You must learn its story, understand its value, before you can fully claim what I've hidden. The photographs are the key to this story. The ranch isn't just land, it's a part of our family history, one that has been forgotten. The fortune isn't in gold, but in the land itself. Only when you understand the history will you unlock the true value of what I've left for you. I sat there for a long moment, trying to process his words. The treasure was not just wealth. It was the history of the ranch, the family, the land. The photographs in the box were a mix of old family pictures, some from when Lawrence and I were children, others from our parents' time. As I studied them, I noticed something strange. In the background of one of the pictures, there was a structure I had never seen before. It was small, overgrown with vines, but it looked like a building of some sort. The photograph was taken from a distance, but the structure stood out clearly. I had never seen anything like it on the ranch, and yet, here it was, captured in this old picture. I had to find it. I had to know what this place was. The next morning, I set out to search for the building, following the trail from the photograph. The land seemed endless, and every tree, every rock felt like a part of the mystery my brother had left behind. As I walked further from the house, the terrain grew rougher. I stumbled over roots and tripped on rocks, but I couldn't stop. My feet carried me forward, as if some unseen force was pulling me toward the truth. After what felt like hours, I finally saw it, a small stone structure, hidden in a thicket of trees. It was old, covered in ivy and moss, but it was unmistakable. This was the place from the photograph. My heart pounded in my chest as I approached. The building was almost completely hidden by the overgrowth, but there was a door, barely visible under layers of vines. I pushed them aside and opened the door. Inside, the air was musty, the smell of decay overwhelming. But what I saw inside made my breath catch in my throat. There were boxes, crates, and old furniture stacked against the walls. But more than that, there were old documents, family heirlooms, deeds, letters, all piled up in the corner. This was it. This was the fortune Lawrence had hidden. But it wasn't gold. It wasn't money. It was the history of our family, the legacy of everything we had once built together. My hands shook as I reached for the documents, knowing that everything I had been searching for was finally within my grasp. But as I looked through the papers, I realized something else. This wasn't just a treasure for me. It was a treasure for our family, for anyone who understood the value of what we had. I could feel the weight of my brother's legacy in my hands, and I knew that my journey was far from over. The real question now was what to do with it all. How could I protect this history? How could I share it with others? But most of all, how could I honor Lawrence's memory and the gift he had left me? I spent the next few days inside that small, hidden building, sorting through the old documents and heirlooms Lawrence had left behind. The more I uncovered, the more I realized just how much my brother had kept hidden from me. There were deeds to properties I didn't know existed, letters from people I had never heard of, and photographs that captured a different life, one I hadn't been a part of. It was overwhelming. I had always thought of Lawrence as a man who valued his privacy, but now I saw just how deep that need for secrecy ran. He had left me more than just a ranch, he had left me a legacy, a tangled web of history that spanned generations. Each paper I touched seemed to reveal more about the person he had become after we lost contact. I found letters between him and a distant relative, a woman I had never known, and stories of the family's rise to power in the early 1900s. They had once owned much of the land around here, and the ranch had been the center of it all. But there were also signs of a deeper conflict, mentions of a hidden fortune that had been carefully concealed to protect the family's future. As I pieced together these old records, a picture began to form. Lawrence's actions, his decision to leave me the ranch, were part of a larger plan. But why? What had driven him to hide this treasure so well, and why had he waited until after his death to reveal it? As I stood there, staring at the pile of papers in front of me, I could almost hear his voice. He had always been the pragmatic one, the one who kept his emotions buried deep inside, never letting anyone in. Yet here I was, holding the key to his life's work, the very thing he had spent so much time and energy guarding. There was a loud noise outside, and I immediately froze. I hadn't expected any visitors, but the truck that had been parked by the barn for the past few days came into view. It wasn't the same truck I had seen before, but something about it made my heart race. The vehicle pulled up near the entrance of the ranch, and two figures stepped out. I didn't recognize them. They looked like they meant business. I couldn't stay hidden in the building forever. I had to confront them. As I walked toward the door, my hands trembled. Who were these people? What did they want? Had they been following me? The thought made my stomach twist, but I steeled myself. This was my inheritance, my legacy, and I wasn't about to let anyone take it from me without a fight. I stepped outside, and the cool air hit my face. The truck doors slammed shut as the two men approached. I kept my distance, watching them closely. One of them, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, looked at me with a sharp gaze. The other man was shorter, with dark hair and a serious expression. Neither of them spoke at first, but I could sense the tension between us. "Can I help you?" I asked, my voice steady despite the nervousness rising in my chest. The taller man took a step forward, eyeing me with a calculating look. "We're here to talk about the ranch," he said. "You found the treasure, haven't you?" I felt my heart skip a beat. How did they know about the fortune? I had been so careful, so sure that no one else knew what was hidden here. "What are you talking about?" I asked, trying to play it cool. The man smirked. "You know exactly what we're talking about. Lawrence's legacy. The fortune he left behind. It's ours now." My mind raced. I didn't know who these men were, but they were clearly after the same thing I was. "It's not yours," I said firmly. "This ranch and everything here belong to me." The shorter man stepped forward now, his eyes narrowing. "You don't understand," he said, his voice low and threatening. Lawrence was our business partner. We have a claim to the fortune. You're just a woman in a nursing home. You have no idea what you're dealing with. Anger flared inside me, but I kept my calm. I may not know everything, but I know this is mine. And I'm not going to let anyone take it from me. The taller man laughed, but there was no humor in it. You're out of your depth, old woman. You don't stand a chance against us. I felt a surge of fear, but also determination. They were wrong. I wasn't just some old woman sitting in a nursing home anymore. I was the one Lawrence had chosen to inherit everything, his secrets, his legacy, and now, the fortune. I'm not afraid of you, I said, my voice steady. I don't care who you think you are. This ranch is mine. And I'll fight for it. The two men exchanged glances, but neither of them spoke. For a moment, the air between us seemed to crackle with tension. Then, without another word, they turned and walked back to their truck, the sound of their boots crunching on the gravel fading into the distance. I stood there for a moment, my hands clenched into fists, before I took a deep breath and turned back to the ranch. The fortune wasn't just about money. It was about keeping the legacy alive. Lawrence had trusted me with this, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it from me. Not now, not ever. But as I walked back to the house, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. The men had made it clear, they weren't going to give up that easily. And neither would I. I woke up the next morning to the sound of birds outside the window, but the events from the day before still echoed in my mind. The two men were gone for now, but I couldn't shake the feeling that they would be back, and when they did, it would be for a final confrontation. The ranch, which had once seemed like a quiet, peaceful place, now felt like a battleground. I wasn't just fighting for property or wealth, I was fighting for a piece of my family's history, for a legacy that had been passed down through generations. Lawrence had trusted me with this, and I wasn't going to let it slip away without a fight. I stood up, walking over to the window, and looked out at the vast land. The ranch stretched out before me, with acres of fields and forests, all untouched and unexplored. There was so much here, so many secrets buried beneath the soil. I had only scratched the surface, but every clue I uncovered seemed to lead to another mystery, another layer of the truth that Lawrence had left behind. I couldn't let anyone take that from me, not without a fight. As the sun rose higher in the sky, I decided to take action. I couldn't wait any longer. I had to find the treasure, the hidden fortune Lawrence had left for me. The only problem was, I wasn't sure where to begin. The map, the symbols, and the keys, everything seemed to be connected, but I still couldn't make sense of it all. I had to get inside Lawrence's mind, to understand what he had been thinking when he left all of this behind. I walked down to the study again, the room where I had found so many answers before. The door creaked as I entered, the familiar smell of old books and papers filling the air. I ran my hand along the desk, my fingers tracing the edges of the worn wood. Lawrence had spent countless hours in here, reading, writing, working. It had been his sanctuary, his place of solitude. But now, it felt like a tomb, a place where the past lingered, waiting to be uncovered. I sat down at the desk and opened the drawer where I had found the letter. There were more papers inside, documents that seemed to be tied to the ranch's history, its ownership, its past. As I sifted through them, one letter caught my eye. It was from a man named Richard Vaughn, someone I had never heard of, but the letter was addressed to Lawrence, and it seemed to be discussing the ranch. The letter spoke of an agreement between Lawrence and Richard, a deal to protect something on the land, something valuable. But the language was cryptic, vague. It was clear that Richard knew something about the ranch, something important, but the letter didn't provide any answers. My curiosity was piqued. Who was Richard Vaughn, and why was he involved in the ranch's history? I couldn't just sit here and wonder. I had to find out. I grabbed the letter and went outside, determined to follow any lead I could. The town wasn't far, just a few miles down the road, and I hoped someone there might know about Richard Vaughn. As I drove into town, I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. I was no longer just a woman looking for a hidden fortune. I was uncovering a family secret, a legacy that had been hidden for too long. I stopped at a small diner, a place where the locals gathered, and walked inside. The smell of fresh coffee and eggs filled the air as I scanned the room. Most of the people there were older, farmers and ranchers who had lived in the area their whole lives. I needed to talk to someone who might know about Richard Vaughn, someone who could help me piece this puzzle together. I walked up to the counter, where an older man was sitting, sipping his coffee. He looked up as I approached, his eyes narrowing slightly. "Can I help you, miss?" he asked, his voice gruff but kind. "I'm looking for information about a man named Richard Vaughn," I said, my voice steady but my heart racing. "Do you know him?" The man's expression changed, his eyes flicking to the door, then back to me. "Vaughn, huh?" he muttered, almost to himself. "He was around here a long time ago, but I wouldn't say much more about him. He wasn't the kind of man you'd forget easily, though." I leaned in closer. "What kind of man was he?" The man hesitated, glancing over his shoulder before speaking again. "He was involved in some shady dealings, nothing illegal, but, well, people didn't trust him much. He had a way of getting what he wanted, but he wasn't exactly honest about how he got it. He used to work with your brother, Lawrence, back in the day. They had a falling out, I think, and after that, Vaughn disappeared." My heart skipped a beat. Lawrence and Richard Vaughn had been involved in something together. But what? And why had they fallen out? "Do you know where I can find him?" I asked. The man shook his head. "Last I heard, he was up north. But you won't find him easily. He doesn't like to be found." That was the break I needed. Richard Vaughn might be the key to understanding everything. He knew something about the ranch, about the fortune Lawrence had hidden. I thanked the man and left the diner, feeling a sense of urgency wash over me. The puzzle was getting bigger, and I was getting closer to the answers. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched again. As I drove back to the ranch, the weight of everything that had happened seemed to settle over me. I wasn't just uncovering my brother's past anymore. I was uncovering a story that had been buried for decades, a story that was much bigger than me. And there were people who would do anything to keep it buried. But I was determined to find the truth, no matter what. The fortune wasn't just about gold or land. It was about the legacy, the history of my family. And I wasn't going to stop until I had uncovered every secret Lawrence had left behind. I drove north the next morning, feeling the weight of my mission pressing down on me. The drive was long, with miles of empty road stretching out ahead. But with each mile, my determination grew stronger. I had to find Richard Vaughn. He was the last piece of the puzzle, the key to understanding what Lawrence had left behind. The man at the diner had said Vaughn was hard to find, but I wasn't about to give up. I had already come so far, uncovered so many secrets. I wasn't going to let a few more obstacles stop me. The road led me through small towns and vast fields, the landscape growing more rugged as I ventured further. I had no idea where exactly Vaughn was, but I kept hoping the next turn, the next town, would bring me closer to him. After hours of driving, I reached a small town just outside the city. It was quiet, almost too quiet. The buildings were old, and the streets seemed deserted, as if time had stopped moving here. I parked the car and walked to a local bar, hoping to find someone who knew where Richard Vaughn might be. The air inside was thick with the smell of stale beer and tobacco. A few people sat at the bar, nursing their drinks and talking in hushed tones. I walked up to the counter and ordered a drink, then waited. I wasn't sure who I was looking for, but I knew I had to be careful. Word about me could spread quickly, and I didn't want anyone to know too much. As I sat there, scanning the room, an older man with a gruff face caught my eye. He was sitting at the end of the bar, watching me with a wary gaze. I nodded at him, hoping to strike up a conversation. After a moment, he stood up and made his way over to where I was sitting. "You looking for someone?" he asked, his voice low. "Maybe," I replied cautiously. "I'm looking for Richard Vaughn. You know where I can find him?" The man's eyes narrowed. "Vaughn? What do you want with him? His tone was guarded, almost hostile. I'm just trying to get some answers, I said, trying to sound as calm as possible. The man looked at me for a long moment, then shook his head. Vaughn's not someone you want to be messing with. He's trouble, always has been. I wouldn't go looking for him if I were you. My frustration grew, but I kept my voice steady. I have to find him. It's important. The man studied me for a moment, then leaned in closer. All right, but I'm not going to help you. You'll find him on the outskirts of town, up near the old mill. But I'm warning you, don't get too close. He's got a reputation, and it's not one you want to cross. I thanked him, leaving a tip on the counter before heading out the door. The directions were vague, but it was the best lead I had. I got back into the car and drove toward the old mill. The landscape around me grew more desolate as I approached the outskirts of town. The buildings became fewer, and the roads grew rougher. After a few miles, I saw the mill in the distance, its silhouette looming against the darkening sky. As I got closer, I could see the signs of neglect, broken windows, rusted equipment, and abandoned vehicles scattered around. It was the kind of place where secrets were kept. I parked the car a little way down the road, making sure to stay out of sight. I didn't know what I was walking into, but I had no choice. I had come too far to turn back now. I stepped out of the car and made my way toward the mill, my footsteps echoing in the quiet. The air was thick with dust and the smell of old machinery. I tried to keep my presence as quiet as possible, moving carefully between the buildings. As I rounded the corner, I spotted him. Richard Vaughn. He was standing near a rusted chain-link fence, his back to me. I hesitated for a moment, unsure of how to approach him. But then, I remembered Lawrence's words, trust no one. I wasn't here to make friends. I was here to get answers. I walked toward him slowly, my heart racing. Mr. Vaughn? I called out, trying to keep my voice steady. He turned around slowly, his face hardening as he saw me. What do you want? He asked, his voice cold. I'm looking for information about my brother, Lawrence, I said, my eyes locking with his. You knew him. You were involved with him, weren't you? Vaughn's eyes flickered with something I couldn't quite place. What's it to you? He growled. He left me something, I continued, my voice gaining strength. Something important. And I need to know what it means. What he was hiding. Vaughn stared at me for a long moment, his gaze unreadable. You've been poking around too much. You don't know what you're dealing with, he said, stepping closer. You're out of your depth, Eleanor. This is bigger than you. I didn't flinch. I don't care how big it is. I want the truth. All of it. Vaughn seemed to weigh my words, then, without warning, he turned and walked toward a nearby building. Come on, then, he muttered over his shoulder. I'll tell you what you want to know, but you better be ready for what comes next. I followed him, knowing this was the moment I had been waiting for, the moment that would change everything. I had no idea where this path would lead, but I couldn't stop now. I had to know what Lawrence had been hiding, and I had to face whatever came next, no matter the cost. I followed Richard Vaughn into the dimly lit building, my heart pounding with a mixture of anticipation and dread. The air inside was musty, filled with the scent of old wood and metal. Vaughn led me to the back, where a large, weathered table sat in the center of the room, cluttered with papers and old maps. It was clear that he had been expecting me, as if this moment had been planned all along. As he gestured for me to sit, I hesitated for a moment, my eyes scanning the room for any sign of what was really going on here. You want to know the truth about Lawrence, don't you? Vaughn asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. About the treasure he left behind? I nodded, my mind racing. Every instinct told me that this was the moment I had been working toward, the moment when everything would finally make sense. But I had learned long ago not to trust easily. Tell me everything, I said, my voice steady despite the tension that was coiling inside me. Vaughn sighed and sat down across from me, his hands resting on the table. Lawrence was a complicated man, he began, his eyes distant as he spoke. He always had his own way of doing things. But we were partners, in more ways than one. We built something together, something that was supposed to last. What was it? I asked, leaning forward. What were you building? Vaughn paused for a moment, as if weighing whether or not to continue. Then, he spoke, his voice low. It wasn't just about the ranch. Lawrence knew something that had been hidden for generations. This ranch, the land, it wasn't just a place. It was a key, a place that held something far more valuable than anyone could imagine. A key to what? I pressed, my mind racing. To an inheritance that goes beyond money, Vaughn said slowly. This ranch holds secrets, things that were buried to protect our family, to protect the future. Lawrence knew that. That's why he kept it all hidden. I was on the edge of my seat now, the pieces of the puzzle falling into place. You're telling me that the treasure isn't just money? I asked, struggling to understand. Vaughn nodded. No. It's knowledge. It's power. And it's something that people would kill to get their hands on. My stomach tightened at his words. Why didn't Lawrence ever tell me about this? I asked, my voice trembling. He didn't trust you, Eleanor, Vaughn said bluntly. He thought you were too soft, too easily swayed by others. But he left the ranch to you because he knew you were the only one who could understand it, who could protect it. I sat back, stunned. I had always felt like an afterthought in my brother's life, but hearing this now, it was like a bombshell. So what do I do now? I asked, the uncertainty creeping into my voice. Vaughn's eyes darkened. You need to go to the place where it all began, he said, his tone urgent. The place where Lawrence first uncovered the secret. That's where you'll find the answers you're looking for. Where? I asked, feeling the weight of the moment pressing on me. The old cabin, Vaughn replied. It's deep in the woods, on the edge of the ranch. Lawrence used to go there alone, for hours at a time. He said it was the key to everything. I felt a rush of adrenaline as Vaughn spoke. This was it, the final step. The truth was just ahead. But something about Vaughn's words left a nagging feeling in the pit of my stomach. What aren't you telling me? I asked, my voice sharp. Vaughn hesitated, then leaned forward, his gaze locking with mine. There's one thing you need to know, he said quietly. You're not the only one who's been looking for this. There are others, people who are willing to do anything to get their hands on what Lawrence left behind. And they won't stop until they have it. My heart skipped a beat. What do you mean? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. I'm talking about people who know about the cabin, about the secrets buried there, Vaughn replied. They'll be watching you. They'll be following you. You need to be careful, Eleanor. This isn't just a treasure hunt, it's a fight for survival. I felt a cold shiver run down my spine. The stakes were higher than I had imagined. But there was no turning back now. I'm ready, I said, my voice firm. I'll find the cabin. I'll uncover the secrets. Vaughn looked at me for a long moment before standing up. Then go. But don't say I didn't warn you. I didn't waste any time. I stood up, grabbed the map, and headed out of the building. The night was falling, and I knew I had to act fast. The cabin was waiting, and I had no idea what I would find when I got there. But I knew one thing for sure, I was not going to let anyone take what was mine. I drove back to the ranch, my mind focused on the cabin. The road to the woods was narrow and winding, the trees closing in around me. The deeper I drove, the more isolated it felt. The world seemed to fall away, and all that was left was the journey ahead. I reached the edge of the forest just as the last light of the day faded. The cabin, barely visible through the trees, loomed ahead like a shadow from the past. My heart pounded in my chest as I got out of the car and walked toward it. This was the moment I had been waiting for. The truth, the legacy, everything I had been searching for, it was all here, buried in the past. And I was about to uncover it.